Do you want to be at your happy weight, maintain it with little to no effort, and never diet again? If that's a yes, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Perfect Gauge. I'm your host, Caroline Trickey, dietitian and eating psychology coach, and I'm so glad you're here. If you were with us for the last episode, episode 1, we discussed the perfect gauge, the 3-step process I use with clients to help them get to their ideal weight and maintain it effortlessly. And those steps are: eat when your body is hungry, eat what your body wants, and stop when your body has had enough. And as I mentioned at the end of the last episode, these skills sound very straightforward and logical. But when you try to put them into practice, you'll likely struggle, because most people do. So while the perfect gauge process is based on these 3 simple steps, it goes beyond that and includes the essential skills so that you can do the steps. So it really is a skills-based method that empowers you with the tools and strategies that can help you improve how you think about food, your body, and how you use food. And this is not some 10-day plan. This kind of work does go deep and takes time. It's a process. So today we're going to take a look at the first of the 3 steps of the perfect gauge process, which is eat when your body is hungry. First of all, know that hunger is a survival mechanism. You need to eat to live, and your body will tell you in no uncertain terms when it is hungry. Now, when you first hear this step, it might sound simple. You may even think, that's what I do already. But when you start to pay attention to when you eat, you'll likely discover that it's not what you're doing, and in fact, to do it properly, this step is surprisingly challenging. And the reason you find it challenging is because much of our eating these days is done on autopilot. You react and eat, but what you're reacting to rarely is real hunger. You feel a twinge of something that may or may not be hunger, and you eat. You feel upset or angry or frustrated, and you eat. You see food and eat. Someone offers you something and you eat. It's lunchtime or morning tea time or dinner time, so you eat. You react and eat. But is what you're reacting to actual body hunger? And how do you know? Because there are 2 types of hunger, what I refer to as real hunger and fake hunger. Real or stomach hunger is a sensation you feel in your body. Hunger is mainly signaled by a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is produced on the lining of the stomach when the stomach is empty. The longer the stomach is empty, the more ghrelin will be produced and the hungrier you will feel. As you get hungrier, your stomach may start to rumble, but know that not everybody's stomach rumbles. I once heard someone say, and I couldn't agree more, that being hungry is like being in love. If you don't know, you're probably not. So that, in a nutshell, is real hunger. Then there's fake hunger. Fake hunger isn't a signal from your body, it comes from your mind. It's the thought that you should eat or that you want to eat. It's thoughts like, I think I should eat. Oh, that looks good. I just want something. I'd better go and get something to eat. Or, I need chocolate. It's your mind telling you to eat, not your stomach. Thing is, in this fast-paced world, it's easy to mix these 2 hungers up and eat when you're not actually hungry. You're so used to listening to your mind. You're so used to being directed by your mind. You're so used to not inhabiting your body, not really being in your body, that you don't pay attention to its signals. You assume it's hunger causing you to eat, but how often do you stop and check? Clients will tell me that yes, they are hungry when they eat, but when we delve deeper, and start to examine things, it turns out they're not. It's their thoughts telling them to eat. They're creating the signal of hunger with their mind. It's not coming from their body. And it can be hard to distinguish between the two as they feel so similar. So this is one of the first and most important skills I work on with my clients. It's the skill of knowing the difference between real and fake hunger. Many of us have forgotten what our physical hunger sensations actually feel like, especially if we've spent most of our lives trying to ignore our hunger cues, following diets or eating by the clock. That's why it's a skill you need to spend time rebuilding. And it really is the most important skill to be able to do and do well, because if you skip this step and you don't really know how to listen to your hunger, you'll struggle with the next two steps of the perfect gauge process. You likely won't know what you want to eat, and you won't know what fullness feels like either. So in order to know if what you're experiencing is real or fake hunger, it can help to take a closer look at the three main reasons why we eat. So the first one, which we've already discussed, is eating in response to physical or body hunger. This is when you eat in response to a physical need for food. When your body physically needs food, you will feel physical sensations that signal you, that tell you it's time to eat. So that's the first reason why you eat. Then there's emotional eating. This happens when you eat not because you're physically hungry, but because you want to avoid or create an emotion. It's often experienced as a food craving where you are wanting to eat a specific type of food, like chips or biscuits or chocolate or ice cream. And finally, habitual eating is eating out of habit, whether you are hungry or not. Habitual eating is usually done at specific times, like breakfast time, lunchtime, morning or afternoon tea time. You get the idea. And while sometimes there's no getting around this, such as break times at work, and that's okay, it's just important to acknowledge that habitual eating doesn't always align with your physical needs. So in an ideal world, you'd only eat when you're physically hungry, when your body is actually hungry. But as I just mentioned, sometimes it's hard when you have specific break times at work. So that's something I work on a lot with clients. In particular, not eating just because it's break time or not eating for the hunger to come. And while that often takes some adjusting and playing around with, it really comes down to what you do most of the time. The most difficult part of eating when your body is hungry is when it comes to emotional eating patterns. Most of us have an emotional eating habit because it's how we learned to cope with things when we were younger. We eat when we're happy, sad, lonely, stressed, bored, or because we don't feel good about ourselves. We eat in secret, in the car, or when everybody else has gone to bed. We eat because food comforts us, at least temporarily. We learn this when we're children, and as adults, we continue with this behaviour because we want that sense of relief. We eat because we have a desire to eat. It has nothing to do with your hunger signals. It has nothing to do with your body's need for energy or nutrients, and everything to do with feeling bored, stressed, lonely, and wanting to change that. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with emotional eating. In fact, it's a normal part of being human. We all emotionally eat at times. It really is a matter of how much and how often. Emotional eating really becomes a problem when you feel like you're completely out of control or when food is your only coping mechanism. Some people are unaware that their emotions are driving them to eat, so they try to work out around their emotional eating by using external rules to avoid the behaviour. They go on diets that introduce external rules, cut out sugar, desserts, or carbs. Not buy the food so it's not in the house, but rarely do these strategies work long term. Over time, these methods become harder and harder to stick to. Plus, no matter what external rules you try, you'll eventually fall back into old coping mechanisms and likely continue to struggle with your weight. It makes better sense to address the actual problem, and that starts by seeing that emotional eating is just an attempt to meet an emotional need. So it's about recognizing what that emotional need is that you're trying to meet with food, and then asking if that's actually what you want to do. And hey, if that's what you want to do, if you want to eat emotionally, go ahead. But do it consciously and with full permission. While you're eating, realize that you're using food as a coping mechanism, and then when you're done, you may want to find a more effective way of dealing with what's happening, what was driving you to eat. After all food does is distract you from your feelings for a temporary period of time. It's not actually addressing the underlying emotional need you have. And know that emotional eating can actually be really helpful. It can alert you to something that's happening in your life that needs attention. Many years ago, when my life was a shit show, I was unhappy in my job and my marriage then, I would emotionally eat often. But I didn't realize at the time that it was trying to alert me to the fact that I was so miserable and needed to do something about my life. Until I hit rock bottom, started seeing a counsellor, started sorting my life out, and the emotional eating pretty much resolved on its own. Emotional eating is probably the biggest reason why any of us eat when we're not actually hungry. And if you're not eating due to hunger, it's easy to eat a lot and not feel full. You won't get the signal to stop eating because you weren't hungry for food in the first place. So if you're trying to maintain or lose weight, eating for reasons other than hunger and doing so often is definitely going to work against you. Now, while there are several skills I teach my clients to help them get really good at recognizing their real hunger and help them manage emotional eating, here's a very practical tool you can start to use on yourself. Next time you think you're hungry, before rushing off to grab something quickly to eat, stop and ask yourself, am I really hungry? And see what happens. Hunger is not an emergency. If it's real hunger you're experiencing, as in your body has run out of fuel, your body can turn any excess fat you have on your body into fuel, which, after all, is what it's there for. One way to tell if it's real hunger or not is the speed at which it comes on. Real hunger won't feel as urgent or specific as an emotional food craving. So if it feels like you need to act now or something terrible will happen, that's fake hunger. Hunger coming from your mind. Real hunger comes on more gradually and slowly, allowing you time to find or prepare something to eat. So ask yourself first, am I really hungry? Because if you want to eat when you're not hungry, then you're hungry for something else besides food. Now, the worst thing that could happen when you try out this exercise is that you might not be quite sure if it is hunger, so you wait a little longer and you might end up hangry. But despite feeling like it, that's not really a life-threatening situation. So that's what I have for you today. Before eating, ask yourself, am I really hungry? And pay attention to what happens. And then join me next week when we look at the second step of the perfect gauge process, which is eat what your body wants. And this is a really controversial step for so many of my clients, especially those with a long history of dieting. So make sure to tune in next week, and thank you so much for joining me today.